Presentation of the beach monitoring survey. David?
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Annually, the town conducts an annual beach condition survey. This is comprised of land-based and hydrographic surveys along the Nourish project area, along with points to the north and south. This data is analyzed and an annual report prepared. And this year it's with our engineering consultant, Moffitt & Nichol. And this is in accordance with our beach maintenance and monitoring plan, which is primarily done for FEMA eligibility, but it also aids in the planning process for future nourishment projects, as well as going ahead and tracking the condition of our beach with our nourishment triggers, which are noted within our beach nourishment master plan. So I'm going to bring up Dr. Beth Shadone from Moffitt & Nichol to go ahead and report on the survey, which spans from October 2024 to June of 2025.
Thanks so much, David, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm happy for the opportunity to speak with you today. As David said, I'm Beth Shadone in the Raleigh office of Moffitt & Nichol, and I'll be sharing the results of the annual monitoring survey. Here's an outline of the talk. I'm going to review quickly the survey transects, the dates of the survey, the methodology we use to evaluate the shoreline and volume change, and then summarize the findings, including the status of the beach nourishment master plan triggers. As David said, I'm going to provide a brief update on the planning for the town's next beach nourishment project, and then we have some time for questions if the board would like to ask some questions. This slide shows the monitoring survey transects. As David mentioned, the town conducts this survey along the nourished ocean front, which is the area shown in green that has had previous placement, as well as all the way north from Bonnet to the town boundary on the north side, and then south of the town boundary down to Oregon Inlet. This year's summer monitoring survey was conducted in June, from June 16th through the 22nd of 2025. This slide is primarily just an example to show how the shoreline change is measured. Our methodology is to use the elevation of the mean high water contour, which is 1.18 feet NAVD 88, and just compute the difference from one year to the next. In this case that's shown here, there was about 80 feet of shoreline change between the blue and the red survey dates. We also do an assessment of volume change, and that is done above different elevations as shown in this graph. First, to capture the changes in the dune, we measure the volume above the +6 foot contour. That gives us insight into that protective dune and how that is performing for the town. Then we look at the dry beach changes above the mean high water contour. Then what we call the recreational beach, so that's to kind of where people would be swimming out to the -6 foot NAVD 88 contour. Then out to the outer bar, which is elevation -14. This outer bar is kind of where we think most of that protective function of the beach profile, where that volume is, that's causing waves to break on the outer bar. The dune is resisting storm surge and wave overtopping. So that portion of the beach is the primary portion that is providing that storm resistance. We compute down to what's called the depth of closure, which is the depth at which waves are normally moving sand. That in the town's case is at elevation -19 feet NAVD 88, and we do compute changes out to the -30 foot contour, which is kind of the maximum depth of potential closure. So that's kind of just what's happening more offshore. This slide shows the wave activity that happened between June 2024 and June 2025. As David mentioned, there was the June 2024 survey, and then there was, as y'all will recall, the October 2024 survey, just to assess what was happening. The PTC 8 happened in September between those two surveys. It actually turned out, as you'll recall from October, that the town didn't lose sand from the system in that PTC 8 event, which is somewhat of good news. And then the June 2025 survey. And what you'll notice here is that there really were not, over this season, there were not that many very high wave events. There's only 4 that are above 10 feet. So really that's not typical. There's usually more larger events. And this shows 2 wave roses. The one on the left is the wave rose from June 2024 to June 2025. And then the right-hand side is kind of that long-term typical record all the way from 1997 until June 2025. And so you'll see typically the town's environment is such that predominant waves are more straight from the east. There's nor'easters and larger waves coming from the northeast, and some waves coming from the east-southeast. What was a little bit different over this past season is that waves were predominantly from the east-southeast, more so than the east. And so that's, I think, maybe one of the reasons why the measured erosion wasn't as large as typical. And in fact, the town ended up gaining sand in some of the elevations. So this plot shows bar graphs of the elevation, those volumetric elevations, the changes by reach. So starting at the left, you'll see Nags Head North, and that's from East 8th to Bonnet. Reach 1 is from Bonnet to Governor Street. Reach 2 is Governors to James. Reach 3 North is James to Limulus. Reach 3 South is Limulus to Loon. And then Reach 4 is Loon all the way to McCall. And then the National Seashore is from McCall down to Oregon Inlet. So what I would like to point out here, if you see the yellow bar that's very positive, that shows accretion in all of the reaches above the -14 contour. So that is the limit of the outer bar, and that's, as I said, the sand we consider to be providing most of the protection against storm impacts. The orange bar, which is much smaller and looks a little bit red on the screen, is a change above the +6. So that's kind of your dune changes, and you'll notice those are negative across all of the reaches except for Reach 2. With Reach 3 South and Reach 4 being the largest losses in the dune. The purple is the dry beach change above the 1.18. And that also is negative across Reach 3 North, Reach 3 South, Reach 4, and Reach 1. There was accumulation in the dry beach in Reach 2 and in Nags Head North. And then I'll obviously notice this teal bar, which is very negative. So that's the change above the -30. And what that is telling us is that there was a lot of losses out past the -19. So the very offshore sand that's out past the depth of closure has actually probably moved either alongshore or offshore into deeper elevations. And these are just some example profiles to kind of walk you through those changes. Transect 855, this one shows basically dry beach erosion and then some accretion in the dry beach, but then, deposition on the shore face. So essentially in that underwater portion of the beach, there's deposition, and then you see this sandbar has actually moved offshore it was over here and then moved further offshore. And then you see this loss in the offshore where the red is. And similarly on the other one, there's shoreline recession as the beach profile basically flattened out, with sand being lost from the dry beach and moving into the near shore, sandbar moving offshore, and then some losses out in the offshore. And without really doing any sort of like modeling or further analysis, we really don't know exactly what's happening out there. Our theory is there's potentially some alongshore processes that could be happening out there. This is just kind of the same information in a table format. Just wanted to point out these negative changes in the volume in the dry beach in all of the reaches except for reach 2. As you saw in the bar graph, these are just kind of the table version of that. But then if you look at the cumulative volume change above that depth of closure, which is kind of what we do monitor for purposes of the FEMA beach maintenance and monitoring plan, that's the active system. If you look at the overall total, within the nourished oceanfront, there was a gain of almost 70,000 cubic yards. And if we extend that out to the monitored oceanfront, there was a gain of about 263,000 cubic yards. And that's about 2 cubic yards a foot within the nourished oceanfront of accumulation, and about 3.5 cubic yards per foot if you go all the way out to the total monitored oceanfront. So generally, that would not be expected to be a positive number. In fact, between June 2023 and June 2024, the nourished oceanfront lost 9.2 cubic yards per foot, and the total monitored oceanfront lost almost 10 at 9.8 cubic yards per foot. So some of that material has moved back into the system during this June 24 to June 2025 period. So take-home message from this table is that this was not that bad of a year. It was a fairly stable year for the town's beaches. This slide shows the cumulative volume change above the +6. Again, that's the dune changes since before the nourishment project in 2019. And so essentially there's a net gain in the dune in every reach in the town except for reach 4 at the very south side of town. So those dunes compared to pre-nourishment status have grown in all of the reaches except for reach 4. This one is the shoreline change. All the bars go from left to right in time. So again, from the post-nourishment all the way through the June 2025. This green arrow by reach 3 south just shows that this was kind of a dramatic change that had happened, where the shoreline actually went landward of where it was before the 2019 nourishment, but that actually recovered back to approximately the same position as before the 2019 nourishment by the time of the June survey. So in October, that shoreline had receded, but by June, it had recovered again. And you see something similar in reach 4, where you can almost not even see the bar that was there from the October survey, but it has recovered back since the June 2025 survey. This is the total nourished oceanfront volume change above the -19 compared to the pre-nourishment. Reach 1 and Reach 2 have gotten additional sand since the pre-nourishment levels, but in contrast, Reach 3 North, Reach 3 South, and Reach 4 have lost sand lost the place sand, some portion of the place sand, with Reach 4 having lost the most at 56% of the nourished material. This one shows instead of by reach, you're used to seeing these plots be, you know, the reaches on the x-axis, but this is the elevations, and it's over the entire nourished ocean front. So you can see above the +6 how the dunes have changed. Those have increased mostly, I mean, they've net increased since the pre-nourishment condition, of course, but between October of 24 and June of 25, they did decrease a little bit, but still in a better situation than just after the nourishment project in August 2019. The above the mean high water and above the -6 have both lost material when compared, lost material compared to what was placed in the 2019 project. There's a little bit of gain. The 2019 project is sort of this, you can kind of, that's the green bar. There's been a little bit of gain above the -14 and some additional gain above the -19 when compared with what was placed in the 2019 project. So this slide here shows the status of the nourishment triggers associated with the master plan by reach. So we're back to the reaches being on the x-axis and the volumes on the y-axis. Overall, the oceanfront minimum profile volumetric trigger is 464 cubic yards per foot. There are variable triggers by reach, which are shown in the dotted lines. And for in general, all of the reaches are above those master plan nourishment triggers. But it's also useful to kind of look at every single profile across the beach and compare them with the triggers, which we're doing here for 2025 only. So the town still does have protection against a 25-year storm. However, in the localized areas, there are individual transects that are below the triggers, and those are shown in red. And then some are getting close to the triggers, which are shown in sort of orange, yellow colored. So these are the summary or key takeaways. So this period had lower than usual wave heights and more waves coming from the east-southeast, and we believe that likely contributed to milder than usual volumetric changes with a net increase above the -19 instead of a net loss like we saw from 23 to 24. In Reach 1 and in South Nags Head reaches 3 north, 3 south, and 4, there have been volumetric losses in the dry beach and in the dune. That material has been shown to be remaining in the system between the near shore and the outer bar. As I showed, there have been losses in the deeper elevations beyond the -19 foot contour, and that's possibly due to some kind of alongshore processes. But the take home kind of there is once that material moves out beyond that -19 elevation, it's really less likely to return to the dry beach. And so before I do a brief update on the beach nourishment project planning, I wanted to pause for any questions on the monitoring results.
Mr. Sears. Commissioner Lambert? No. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. So now I wanted to I just have a couple slides on the status of the planning for the 2026 or 2027 beach nourishment project. The project aim, just to kind of remind everybody, is that it would restore that design level of protection where needed and provide an advanced fill berm for the next 6 years of background erosion. And so in this figure, the design level of protection or the base fill is that dune and burn. That's kind of the minimum that we want to keep there all the time. And then the advanced fill is that counteracting of the ongoing erosion so that the town is always protected by that design level of protection. So where the dunes have been significantly impacted, those would be restored in this project. So brief summary of what's planned for the project. It would be sand placement all the way across the nourished oceanfront from Reach 1 to Reach 4. There's a 500-foot taper into National Park Service property on the south side of town. This is the first time the town will have done that. The town has worked closely with the Park Service to get a special use permit for that to occur, and that's already been obtained for the project. The main portion of the project is construction of that advanced fill beach berm, and there is going to be dune construction and repair to restore the level of protection in Reach 3 South and Reach 4 where those dunes have been impacted. The base bid is about a 2.2 million cubic yards of sand, and there are 2 additive alternates, each of 100,000 cubic yards, and those would be specified. To be placed at locations as determined by the town. And these are some of the project milestones. The project was actually advertised on the town's website and in Dredge Wire on Monday. Those plans have been requested by a number of dredge contractors. And then there is a pre-bid meeting which will be held virtually for, it's optional for contractors that wish to tune in and provide some additional information on the project. There'll be an opportunity for bidders to submit written questions. The bids are due in November on the 13th. I believe the opening is at 2 p.m. And then I believe the board is planning a workshop in December to review the information and the bids and make a decision, and then an intent to award could be issued January 7th with a notice to proceed to follow in April 1st. And this project is being advertised to potentially be constructed in 2 seasons. Bid A is for summer 2026 construction, and bid B is for summer 2027 construction. And regarding the permitting, in addition to that Park Service special use permit, the 401 water quality certification has been received, as well as the CAMA permit has been received, and we're still waiting on the Army Corps of Engineers permit. But we anticipate that being received relatively soon. And that is all I have. Thank you. Any questions regarding the project?
I have a couple of questions. First, it's my understanding that some of our sister towns to the north may be doing nourishment in 27.
Yes, sir. That's my understanding as well.
So, is there any experience on what kind of impact that has on bids? Is it, you know?
That's a great question. I believe in 2022, Nags had a project. Granted, it was a smaller scale project. The 4 towns had a project, and I also believe Avon and Buxton had a project. So that was really kind of a case study for, wow, they really can get a lot of these projects accomplished at the same time with different contractors. I think at this point the town is at somewhat of an advantage because the bid is already out and it will be out first, and it's always beneficial to have the opportunity to do that long-range planning for the contractors. So I don't know. I guess it really can depend on what other projects are going on, whether it's beneficial to have a lot of projects occurring in the same general area and reducing mobilization costs, or if there's just not enough plant to accomplish all of them if they're committed elsewhere. So it's really kind of a tough question. But I think by bidding 2 seasons, it does provide the town with more information and flexibility to make that decision depending on how those come in.
Do you have any idea what it would take to get a better understanding of that longshore process that may be taking some of the sand in the outer extent of the project?
I mean, that's a good question. There could be numerical modeling. It's difficult because we know there are these alongshore movements of those large sandbars that are pretty far out due to currents and different processes that are occurring out there. And it sometimes doesn't necessarily seem to be directly attributable to something simple, like like the wave conditions or something like that. I think it's a complicated question. I would need to maybe think about it and talk to our numerical modelers and see if they could even have an idea of what it might take to kind of be able to assess exactly what's happening out there. It is interesting, and it's
right. I guess my primary concern in that interest is we're in pretty good shape, fortunately, and we're getting ready to undertake a very significant project, despite the fact that we're in pretty good shape, and despite the fact that we have sand loss in that area that we don't understand. Nonetheless, I'm also very aware that we have not had a major storm, and I'm also aware of what's happening south of us, where there's not beach nourishment. So I'm not saying I'm not in favor of proceeding with the beach nourishment project. I think I'd like to maybe have a little more understanding of the processes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I will say too, remember that this survey was conducted in the summer, and we have since had Aaron, which has had additional impacts on the dunes, and then whatever Imelda is doing right now, which hopefully is not too much out here, but right. As you said, there's certainly been effects further south. There could be the opportunity if the board wanted to proceed with another fall survey like we did last year, and see if that is a trend that's continuing, or is that something that's stopping, or we can go back and see if that's something that we could provide additional information on with the numerical modeling assessment.
Right. Commissioner Lambert.
The first question you asked was the similar question I had, and I have the same concern. It's kind of threading the needle when we're looking at Buxton. I'm glad we're in good shape, but
yeah. Commissioner Sears.
Yeah, you mentioned the town has say-so in 200,000 cubic yards of sand. Do you have any suggestions for the town when it comes to where that sand should be placed?
Oh, for the extra additive alternates. I actually think it's a nice. Right now, I think there are concerns about the width of recreational beach in some of the northern parts of town, and that might be beneficial to be able to widen the recreational beach if it's not necessarily needed elsewhere to address a level protection issue. If at the time of construction there is some kind of hot spot or level protection issue, then it's nice that the town will have the opportunity to say, no, we want to focus addressing this hot spot. So if that's not necessary, I think it would be beneficial to address some of the recreational beach needs, but if it is needed for a level of protection or infrastructure protection, it would be able to be focused there kind of based on the condition of the beach at the time of construction.
All right, thank you, Doctor.
And I don't want to leave this discussion without expressing thanks to Dave Howick and the National Park Service for working out that taper on the south end, because that's always been a big issue for us down there, and maintaining protection for those properties at the very south end of town. And that's going to be I think it's going to be huge for us. So yes, thanks to them. Thank you very much.